Well, I'm here with Kevin Leland from Halo. Nice to meet you, Kevin. Can you tell us a little bit about what Halo does?
Sure. So Halo is a AI-powered platform that connects scientists and science-led startups directly with companies for R&D collaborations. So the way it works is companies will post their technology needs to the platform. That could be something like PepsiCo looking for sustainable materials. It could be a chemical company like BASF looking for novel technologies for addressing one of their business needs. And then we have researchers and startups in over 130 countries that submit proposals, and the ultimate goal is some form of collaboration. That could be sponsored research, it could be licensing, it could be an investment or a co-development initiative.
Can you tell me a little bit about kind of the founding story? Like what drew you to this particular problem and space?
Yeah. So it definitely wasn't linear, although the problem that I was trying to solve from the beginning wasn't all that different. What I learned was there's a lot of promising research that happens in universities that never materializes into an actual solution that can impact the world. And so the original idea was actually to identify these promising research projects out of universities that needed just a small amount of funding, say, a couple $100,000, and to raise that money through crowdfunding from alumni, from foundations that cared about that initiative. And what I learned from that approach, which ultimately wasn't successful, was that there were companies that were trying to find these researchers and fund this research. But the way that they were doing it was very antiquated. Going to conferences was relying on your personal network, basically how job searching and recruiting worked before you had platforms like
Sure.
Wellfound. And just seemed to me that there needed to be some network or platform that could more programmatically connect these two sides.
That's awesome. What about, I'd love to hear, so, one of the reasons we're talking is your company has a lot of applicants on our platform. A lot of people are
Mhm.
excited about working at Halo. Can you tell me, what drives people to your platform? What gets people, to your company, what gets them excited about applying?
Yeah, I think, personally, I think it's one of the companies that you can have the most massive social impact on the world because you're not kind of putting your marbles all in one basket in terms of just supporting one biotech company, which is still great, but we're helping support an entire ecosystem, researchers and startups from all over the world, and helping them in massive numbers connect with companies, huge companies, Procter and Gamble, Unilever, BASF, Kraft Heinz, who can help turn their early innovations into something that can help the environment and help the climate, can help treatments for different diseases. And I think that has a huge draw for people. And then on top of that, it's a huge market. So there's a huge upside potential. R&D is a $2 trillion market. It's 10 times larger than advertising. And so it's this rare opportunity where you can work for a for-profit company with a huge amount of upside, but have the feeling like you're working at a nonprofit or having the impact of a nonprofit.
Oh, that's awesome. Have you found that the social mission attracts a different type of candidate? Or, given your background, you've worked at other types of companies that might not have been
Yeah,
social driven?
yeah, absolutely. And first of all, people who care about the environment and helping other people just tend to be genuinely nicer people who are
Yeah.
easier to work with. And then I think that translates into everything else, into their motivation, their skill set, and it just it's important for us that people don't just want to make a paycheck or get a paycheck, but they do care in the mission, and they don't have to be waving flags or like living and breathing this, but we do want people who see the value in advancing science.
When you think about your social mission, are there times where like building a business might come against the social stuff, or do you feel like it kind of works hand in hand and that hasn't been an issue ever?
I think the social mission really does work hand in hand, and that's probably just unique to Halo. I don't know if that's always true, but for the most part, all of the research that we're supporting has some environmental or health impact. I mean, of course, there are projects that are more around, efficiency and finding new, ingredients or whatever it is that doesn't necessarily directly impact those things. But ultimately, the reason the companies are working with us is one of them is really around, sustainability. And they're not all being sustainable just for the sake of being sustainable. It's because regulations in Europe and now in the United States are making it impossible for some of these companies to even sell their products. So it's directly tied to revenue. And also companies are realizing they can't just, advertise their way to growth. They have to innovate, and they have to care about consumer perceptions around their responsibility as corporate citizens. And that's a big part of the projects that we have on Halo that we're helping to advance.
That's awesome. So, what's your pitch to someone looking at other jobs at other companies? Why is Halo a great place to work in your mind?
Yeah, so I don't think it's great for everybody, frankly. If you are used to working at a really big company and you're not comfortable wearing a lot of different hats, it's probably not the best place. But I assume if you're listening to Wellfound and you're familiar with Wellfound, you care about startups. And I think the big value really is you get the upside of a for-profit company. I mean, we're venture backed. We have really great investors. It's a $2 trillion market, as I mentioned, but you get the impact of a nonprofit in the sense that you're helping advance science, you're helping to advance innovations that can improve the planet, that can create new cures and treatments for diseases. And there's just not a lot of companies that can do that. And we always try to balance that with being not taking ourselves too seriously. We want people who take their work seriously, but don't take themselves seriously. And so, for example, whenever we have a new employee start, they create a science poster that is all about their world and who they are. So we really get to know them. We have something called a people protocol, which is kind of a play on a lab protocol, where it's how do you like to interact with other people? What are the things that motivate you? What are the things that kind of drain your energy? Some of our benefits are directly tied to our mission. You get a little bonus check if you participate in a research project.
So one of the interesting things, I'd love to hear a little bit about your company culture. And one of the ways that I've heard culture described is the behaviors that you reward and punish. So in your mind, what are those behaviors? What is your culture like? How do you guys work?
Yeah, I think we, being remote, so we're fully remote. We started during the pandemic. And so once you go remote, it's really hard to go back. It's hard to say, hey, all you people all over the country come all live in Chicago or wherever you are. That also has allowed us, by the way, to attract really great talent that if we were kind of geographically constrained, wouldn't be possible. But I think it is just creating this culture of collaboration and helping people know each other on a personal basis that is even more important for a remote company. And so we really kind of practice this culture of gratitude. Every week during the team meetings, we give out props. And this sounds kind of like touchy-feely, but people just want to feel appreciated. So we'll go around, and we don't have a huge company right now, so it doesn't take that long. And each person recognizes a teammate that was really helpful, kind of went above and beyond that week to really help them. So the team is really always looking out for each other. We have unlimited vacation days, which a lot of startups might have, but everyone's kind of like getting that person's back if they're out. And so I think that's a big part of the culture. And again, just caring about kind of this bigger mission that we have. Like we're trying to advance science, and we're trying to build this big company. It's not about each of us individually. There's no selfish people, I would say, at Halo.
That's awesome. One of the other things I hear about culture is kind of the company takes on a lot of the founder's personality. So tell me a little bit about your personality and how that's kind of affected how you run the company.
Yeah, so I like to be creative for one, which is why I came up with these kind of like fun ways of, creating science posters. I don't take myself too seriously. And so that kind of translates into the kind of people that we have. I joke around a lot. And so I try to bring like a little levity. At the same time, I work too hard and I work too much. And so that does kind of, I guess, translate to the kind of people that ends up working here. But it's not in the sense that I'm not micromanaging people. I don't even know when they're working, frankly, because it's remote. They're not here, so everyone kind of is like self-managed, gets their work done. But it's really hard to kind of, as a founder, to step out of yourself and look at, like, people ask all the time in interviews, like, what's your culture like? I can describe it in my view, but it's like you said, it's kind of like the founder and the culture are almost like one and the same. So to really have a clear-eyed view of that, I usually suggest they ask somebody else who's had worked at different companies. And I've also been in the startup world for so long, I almost forget what a toxic culture is like, or what a good culture is, or versus a bad culture. So yeah.
That makes sense. So I'd love to move over to how you think about building your team and selecting talent. So is
Mhm.
there specific qualities or maybe just the top one or two qualities that you look for when hiring?
Yeah, so I would say one is just being intrinsically motivated. You know, there's not going to be someone who's kind of like watching over you as, a startup, especially like a remote startup. And so we want people who want to do above and beyond and do an excellent job just because that's who they are. Whatever they do, they put in, 120%. And, people who are obviously have a bias to act. So we're not going to, you're not going to be told exactly what to do. You kind of have to navigate the waters and kind of figure things out on your own. Obviously, like I said, it's a very like supportive environment, but there are going to be. We want people to contribute ideas. I'm not going to come up with all the ideas on my own, and they could come from anywhere. They could come from a product person has an idea for a sales motion, which has happened. We've had many times where the customer success team is making product ideas, suggestions. And so we're power users of Slack. We have channels that support idea generation and idea sharing. And so people who are open-minded and collaborative, who aren't going to like shut an idea down. I worked at IDEO back in my career, which is very much about bringing together interdisciplinary thought, making people brainstorming ideas and being generative. And that's the kind of culture that we try to support here. And I think we're pretty successful at it.
So, how do you figure out if a candidate will be open minded, will have a bias towards action? Like, I don't know if that shows up in a resume. Like, what do you guys do to tease this out before you make the hire?
Yeah, so we have pretty rigid interview guides. So even though we're small, our investors they're asymmetric, which is a firm based out of Boston and New York. It's a pretty new firm, but they have a really great team, and including people that had worked in people operations. And so from day one, we've really focused on hiring and people development. And so we have this rigid interview guide where we have a screening call to start out with, and that's obviously like just basically qualifying them. But then after that, we have three interviews, and each one of them is focused on a very specific thing. So one of them is often focused on more like culture and bias for action, and then another one's going to be focused more on a specific skill. So if it's like a marketing role, it could be specifically around their product marketing skill set, and then another might be more around their digital marketing skill set. And so a lot of those questions, so that's like the thematic interviews, and then a lot of them are behavioral or situational. Tell me about a time you did this or that. But honestly, the most illuminating thing that we do is we have an exercise that they do, and they present that to the team, and we push back and ask questions. And there's no better way to evaluate somebody than to simulate working with them. And just seeing how they react to your pushback, I think, kind of gives you a sign into whether they're open minded or not. And I know exercises are, when I was on the other side of this years ago, I always, I didn't love doing that all the time. But I think it's really for the best interest of both the candidate and the employer, because it gives you a sense of what it's like to work together and what the actual job is going to be like. And so that would be my number one recommendation for any hire, is to have them do some sort of exercise.
That makes sense. What about when you think about ways that candidates can stand out? Do you have things that are what is the number one way that candidates can stand out to your company that maybe they're not doing right?
Yeah, so I would say obviously beyond, just their ability to kind of fit the requirements of the role, we put a lot of value in having some sort of startup experience. Someone who worked at Facebook for 10 years is obviously very probably talented, but you really need to have that like boots in the ground experience as a startup. Beyond that, I think there's just a lot of people who just kind of cut and paste their cover letters or their emails that go out to you, and they're often not very well written. So I have a master's in journalism. I put a lot of pride in just being able to communicate effectively, which I think is important, not just for if you're a writer, but just for any job. If you're a product manager, being able to articulate exactly what you're looking for. If you're in sales, being able to explain the value proposition to your customers. So I put a lot of emphasis on writing. It's very easy to get a quick grasp of their writing skills just from like a couple sentences that they send to you. So I would say make sure it's well written, whatever you're going to say, and also make sure it's somewhat customized to the company you're reaching out to, because it just says that like if it's not at all tailored, it's pretty clear that they don't care that much about the specific role, and therefore it's probably not the best fit. Like we want people who are really excited about Halo and really see this as somewhere where they can make a great contribution.
Makes sense. So I'd love to talk a little bit about, we're heading into 2025. I'd love to hear from you kind of how you see the year going. So I have a few questions. So the first question is, how do you see AI translating into the way you guys work, particularly internally, maybe the way you hire, the way you build, all sorts of things?
Yeah, that's like such a big question. I mean, Halo itself is an AI powered platform. Now, pretty much everyone says they're AI powered, and at some point it'll become even like redundant to even say it. It's like saying you have a website. You're like, and AI can be applied in a lot of different ways, including Halo. So now all the chatter is around really because of this Gen AI movement that ChatGPT started, but AI has been used on websites for many, many years, including, I'm sure, Wellfound
Yep.
and other websites. So those things are having an impact on Halo. As a startup, I think it's really challenging to just know where do you want to dedicate your resources to? What's going to be a table stakes feature versus what is going to be a true differentiator as it relates to AI. I also think there's a risk in kind of just following the sheep and just doing what everyone else is doing when maybe AI isn't really what's going to differentiate you. I mean, it's not every business does not have to be fully based on AI. Just having a great network is also a huge value, and having those network effects. So I think that's something that we're frankly struggling with a little bit in terms of like as a small company where we dedicate our resources. Internally, we actually use it a lot. We do a ton of customer discovery. So I would say that's another really key differentiator with Halo is we're so customer obsessed in terms of we're constantly talking to them, and we record every single one of our calls. So we use a tool called Fathom. And so our head of product design very smartly has used Claude and ChatGPT to take all of the transcripts from all of those customer interviews and figure out what are the key insights that we've gathered from our customers. And if we were to do that based on like manually, it would probably take years or just many, many months, right? And it probably wouldn't even, be worth it by the time we finished it. He was able to do that in a couple of days. And so that's just one example, but we're using it constantly. We're constantly using ChatGPT, Claude for everything from customer insights to also helping our customers scope out what the technology need is that they're posting. But it's been a real kind of force multiplier, I would say, for us.
Awesome. So last question, what are your like hot takes, contrarian takes about being a founder, hiring, building a company that you have?
Vinod Khosla said, it was years ago, but he has this great quote where he says the hardest part about being a founder is to figure out whose advice to listen to. And that really resonated with me because as a founder, you're constantly hearing different opinions and different advice from advisors, from your investors, from friends and family, from customers. And I think the one thing to consider is that they are all very smart people, have great insights, but don't ever just take their advice wholesale because they are thinking about your company for a few minutes, maybe an hour a month, probably max. You're living and breathing the company literally like 24/7. So don't take for granted your own intuition and your own gut instincts, which are ultimately the things that I think are going to point you in the right direction, and really think deeply about which of those points of feedback are the ones that you want to follow, which are the ones that keep coming up again and again, and which are the ones that are kind of just random pieces of advice that maybe don't apply to your business, or maybe the circumstances are a little bit different for you.
That's awesome. I like that. Well, thank you so much, Kevin, for taking the time. This has been awesome. Kevin from Halo, everyone.
Thank you so much, Amit. Great to meet you.